Just hit a button, Morty. Give me a beat.
Oh man, okay, alright,
That is an historically accurate video of the events that portrayed on April 26, 1986. In this video, I'll be talking about the Chernobyl incident and the nuclear stigma surrounding it. The day prior to the incident, there was a safety test scheduled for that day. This test was done successfully on the older 3 reactors with no problems, but the advisors at Reactor 4 have tried this 3 prior times, and all of them were failed attempts. A man named Anatoly Dyatlov was the head chief engineer supervising the test. He was nervous because if this 4th attempt failed, he was afraid he would be fired and no other plant would hire him because of his history. The test was originally going to take place during the day shift, but after a call from the electrical administrator for Kiev, they were asked to keep Reactor 4 running at half power to meet the minimum standards for the day output. The Chernobyl reactor remained at half power the rest of the day and into the night shift. Dyatlov didn't want to reschedule the test another day and informed the night shift workers that they will have to execute this test under his supervision. Note that the head advisor of the night shift was only 25 and hasn't even been working at Chernobyl for a year yet, and now he's being asked to conduct a test he's never done in the hour. How would you feel if you were asked this? Now, since you most likely don't know how a reactor works, here's a quick explanation. The Chernobyl Reactor 4 had a graphite surrounding core that heats up water to create steam, which powers turbines to generate electricity. These cores are surrounded by cool water passageways that are used to help cool the core's heat. The reactor also has about 200 boron rods that can be inserted and exerted from the reactor. These rods help reduce the nuclear reaction that creates the heat, so inserting a certain amount of rods can provide them with an estimated amount of reaction within the reactor, so they know how much cool water they need to flow through it. When a reactor is running, it creates an element called xenon. When running at full capacity, this isn't a problem since the xenon easily burns with the steam. But since the reactor has been running on half power for 20 hours now, the core is filled with the xenon like a balloon. This wasn't put into account, and the only way to fix this would be gradually raise the power over 24 hours. The test was to be executed at exactly 1 a.m., so the workers around 12 started lowering the power to get to the designated outage for the test. The test itself was very simple. The reactor power would be lowered to stimulate an outage. During an outage, diesel generators would activate to replace the electricity normally supplied. The generators would take around 50 seconds to get up to working conditions, so the test would see if the reactor could remain stable during this period. So 1 a.m. comes around and the test is initiated. Power is to be dropped down to 1/4 of its normal amount, and the generators were to be activated. As soon as the test started, a strange thing happened. As the power was dropping, it passed its designated amount and continued to drop. This is because of the xenon buildup talked about earlier, and the reactor continues to drop until it gets down to less than 1/30th of its normal power. At this point, the test should have been deemed a failure because the amount of xenon created at this low of power is highly dangerous and would take days to safely raise the power back up. Though this is known by him, Dyatlov commands 25-year-old Akimov, the advisor we talked about earlier, to raise the power back up to where it was intended. Though Akimov tries to tell him no, Dyatlov insists that if he doesn't, he would have him fired. So power is set to rise back up to the intended amount, but when it gets there, it continues to rise. It continues to rise even though they slow down the fuel rates, and the workers begin to panic. Luckily, there's a button for this situation. This button is referred to as the scram button, and pushing it would result in all 211 boron rods inserted at the same time to completely shut down the reactor. But there is a flaw that was hidden by the Soviet government about this button. Turns out, when building a reactor, it's cheaper to tip the boron rods with graphite, and this is exactly what the Soviet Union does. And since graphite increases reactivity, when the workers press the AZ5 scram button and all of the graphite tips touch into the core, the power of Reactor 4 skyrockets to over 3 times its maximum capacity. Thus, the Chernobyl Reactor 4 couldn't handle the amount of steam being created inside it, and the entire reactor explodes. People in the city look into the sky to see a beam of light that rises over the power plant. They have no idea what it means or how their lives will change forever. The next morning, people went on with their lives like they normally did. They went to work and all that. They had no idea that the radiation in their town was high enough to be lethal within 4 days. It only took a day for the Soviets to realize that they needed to evacuate these people. They brought large buses and they parked outside all of the apartments and told them that they would have to be away from their homes for 3 days and could only bring what they could carry. Though they didn't know at the time, these people never returned home again. 2 days after the incident, a power plant in Sweden reports detection of radiation coming from Chernobyl, and they tell neighboring European countries about the incident that happened. This really hurt the Soviet Union because a year prior, Gorbachev introduced a system called glasnost, which was basically to be more truthful to neighboring governments and its people. Great Britain accuses the Soviet Union of trying to cover up a nuclear disaster, and they get really angry with them. This really put a stain on the Soviet government, and as of today, the estimated cost to repair Chernobyl is around 18 billion USD. Before his death, Gorbachev was quoted saying that Chernobyl was possibly the real fall into the collapse of the Soviet Union 5 years after the incident. And with other nuclear accidents, like 3 Mile Island and Fukushima in 2011, today nuclear power only makes up for 10% of the world's power sources. Nuclear power is 8,000 times more efficient than fossil fuels, but it comes at the cost that if something goes wrong, it could potentially cost you your town, your country, or maybe even the world.